Good afternoon and welcome to Salary.com's presentation on total rewards in time of crisis. I'm Kent Plunkett, CCP, founder and CEO of Salary.com. Today's agenda will be discussing the role of total rewards professional in a crisis, things you should consider, strategies for surviving the downturn, and some facts about the new pay reality that we're facing. This webinar is being recorded. Slides and a link to the recording will be shared via email, and there will be time at the end for Q&A. Latest stats, these are obviously alarming. Total COVID cases, 163,000. That's up significantly in just the last week. Economic forecasts are for 24% GDP decline on an annualized basis for Q2 2020. That's not a typo. Sheltering at home, over 70% of Americans are doing that now. And in spite of this, there's a lot of firms out there that are still hiring: Walmart, Amazon, Albertsons supermarkets. But the real story is the unprecedented levels of initial jobless claims from layoffs and furloughs in a single week. 3.2 million. This is a graph that reflects past jobless claims all the way back to the 60s. And you can see there's never been anything like what's happening now. And these numbers are understated because they don't include those who don't qualify to file. So we're really in a special time right now. So the first order of business as a total rewards professional is obviously to keep your employees safe and calm. And you have to start by doing that by taking care of yourself and by making sure that you are staying connected with and talking to your executive team, because they need to understand and have visibility into the value that you contribute to navigating this crisis, both now and on recovery. So obviously, all things in compensation start with your total rewards philosophy. And of course, we want you to use and refer back to your total rewards philosophy as often as possible as your anchor to windward in the troubled waters. You can continue to find ways to pay equitably, even when the climate is quite turmoiled. Communication is always a key to best practices in compensation. And in this time, what we found so far is that employees are looking to trust leadership, and they understand that leadership is looking after the best interests of the company. It seems to be a moment where us versus them is a little bit more of us versus the virus. But on the other hand, as employees begin to understand that their pay may be something that needs to be sacrificed, that tone can change. But we think the right thing to do is to be updating employees frequently about the state of the business and present the strategies that are under consideration for managing through the crisis. So peace of mind of your employees and making sure that you're communicating to address their concerns is a primary role for the total rewards professional. One of the things that some companies surprisingly don't have the technology in place to do is to hold town meetings. And it's quite easy to set up a town meeting using products like a Zoom or other online meeting places where people simply click a link and they're taken into a presentation on the computer where executives can show some slides and talk through what's going on with the company. I'm not going to linger on this because many people do know how to do this, but that is a widely available tool for those people who don't know it, and it's a great way to structure communication when people are working from home. So let's get to what's new about being a compensation professional or an HR leader in this time, because this is a time of great disruption. And in the history of great disruptions, what's been proven is that it accelerates transformation to future states. So if there's a transformation coming in how your organization views your workforce, if there's a transformation coming in how you're paying your people over time, what history would tell us is that's going to be accelerated right now in this environment. And you should embrace those trends and roll with it. We see that the typically more orderly compensation landscape that tends to change more incrementally rather than radically, we think it's going to be radically different for most companies by fall. We're saying right now that all the market data is going to change, even reset lower. Survey data, we believe, will be subject to substantial judgment, adjustment, interpretation to fit the market in the fall. And from the perspective of recruiting to job offers, the spot market pricing has already decreased and will decrease potentially significantly as we see unemployment rates exploding back into the double digits. So with that, in that context, this is a moment where your firm may transform how your company's teams are staffed, skilled, and function. And you may be in a very strong position to provide a guiding hand in that moment. There's also one other opportunity which we'd like to call out, and that is that this may be a moment where instead of seeking pay raises to close any discriminatory pay gaps, for example, on gender bias, that you may be tactically able to chip away at some of those pay gaps as you reset ranges and benchmarks, and as you adjust people's positions in range in what's potentially at a minimum a flat, if not a deflationary wage environment. So if not now, when? So I would urge all comp people to consider this as a moment where you might be able to really do some good by making sure you're not just distributing pay cuts or resetting benchmarks and resetting ranges equally across everybody, but you also allow for the opportunity to close out some of the inequality in pay between and among discriminated classes. More important than probably anything is you need to keep your position intact and maintaining the capacity to do comp work and access to current market data. Because this is a spot where you should be a critical advisor to your CEO and CFO in helping the company navigate the next year successfully. So in our laundry list of kind of items to think about, we do want to make sure that you do think about your health plans, which are fairly obvious. The leave provisions for the US companies tend to lag the rest of the industrialized world. And so you need to check that in addition with the Families First Act. And 401k benefits like matches probably for most companies are going to be difficult to achieve. But there are a lot of regulations around amending those plans or switching them over. And so you need to review them and get up to date. And then other benefits like EAP and telehealth. Right now, there's a surge in telehealth going on out there. And it may be a benefit that you can add relatively inexpensively for your employees. Nobody really wants to go to the doctor's office today. And I think it's important to figure out what tools you need to provide to employees who are being asked to work from home. I think the mental health benefits are fairly obvious, but it's certainly a moment to up the curve on what your EAP program has to offer. From a union perspective, it's going to be interesting, and we believe that there's going to be some downward pressure on collective bargaining agreements and possibly some interim patches made to those agreements in order to preserve the company's ability to move forward. For exempt employees, most will receive their regular pay. Non-exempt employees, though, would typically not be entitled to get paid unless they perform work for that week. One of the important things to consider is that traditional compensation survey data is going to be 6 to 12 months old by the time you receive the reports this fall. that data is going to need to be adjusted significantly to bring it current to the context that we're going to be facing in the fall. We do expect the salaries are falling, and that'll be a drag on current pay levels. And we think that some of those falls will not be reflected in data that's collected this spring. We expect the total cash comp will also fall as bonus programs and variable pay programs are cut or eliminated. And for most employees, company equity will have lost considerable value. A lot of options are going to be underwater due to the shifts this spring in the stock market. We are actually doing a lot of work, including running a pulse survey as an affiliate to our highly regarded national budget survey to collect quantifiable data on what's happening in the markets over the next several months. As far as the regulatory actions, we believe that the actions taken in the last few weeks are going to be augmented by further actions over the next several months. So a checklist of things to consider is here. Most important, understanding the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, which does make changes to sick time and to time off requests for FMLHA. So for example, most companies are now required to offer 2 weeks of paid sick leave at the regular rate of pay if you're impacted by the coronavirus. And then if you take time off for MLHA, you're at 2/3 of your regular rate of pay once you're through the initial 2 weeks that the government pays for. So the government pays the first 2 weeks, and then you're at 2/3 of your regular rate of pay, so someone can be out for up to 10 weeks. And the impact of that nets out to be about 5.5 weeks of paid time off for 10 weeks off. The regular rate of pay is calculated as 6 months average and does include commissions and other variable wages. So what are some of our key strategies for surviving the economic downturn? First, even though you may be working from home at this point, we want you to refresh your network of experts and colleagues. This is a time to be connected to the people in your local area and to experts so that you can react and be a trusted advisor to your executive team. In addition, it helps strengthen your network in the event that you become an impacted employee during the turmoil. One of the things we think that you could do, especially if you're working from home, is to consider initiating some big projects that add value to the company. And often being a sponsor and the person executing a big project can make the difference between your name coming up as somebody that maybe they can live without temporarily, or somebody who it's very important to keep them fully engaged in the business. So big projects you can do: update your market pricing and structures for the whole company. It's going to be important this year to actually have a software tool, we think, to be able to tweak and adjust the data that you get from your surveys. So that would be in our survey management. In addition, our comp analyst market data, we intend to significantly tweak the data that's displayed there to reflect the current market conditions as we're able to assess them. And we're going to try to keep the comp analyst market data up to date for the current market during this period. We also think you should expand your survey participation to embrace some real-time surveys. So quarterly surveys like IPAS and comp data provide you with insight into trends that are more current than the more typical annual survey from some of the other survey houses. We believe that you should not this year over-rely on older data or every other year participation, because that data is just not going to be that accurate. Finally, this might be the year to take on the project to adopt a match once, match all participation. Meaning, for example, with Salary.com, if you can provide to Salary.com a participation file from virtually any survey, any major survey that you participate in, Salary.com can virtually automate your participation in other surveys. And this is a good year to have more data coming in rather than less, and an even better year to be getting a fall survey result and a winter survey result from a quarterly real-time survey. One other big project you could do that would add value is to update your company's entire job description catalog. This is a high value, never enough time in the office type of project. It's also something that if you're not doing it, your competitors might be doing it, because there's been a real surge driven by the need to implement different HRIS systems around companies actually organizing their job description catalog. So we have a product called Job Description Manager at Salary.com. You should ask your account services rep for access to it. We're in beta with a new, completely redone version that's a true enterprise application. And we'd welcome the opportunity to show it to you and provide it to you so that you can consider whether this is a project you want to sign up for this summer. Last, there's been a trend out there for the last 2 years of people beginning to roll out read-only access to your market data to the recruiting organization. Given the degree and amount by which the recruiting spot market number is likely to change in this recessionary environment, we think that's a smart use of a compensation professional's time to roll out access to the tools and provide some training to the recruiters prior to them getting busy again in what we think is going to be a relatively rapid recovery. So the new pay reality. Overall, the context for the problem here is that firms across the globe are suffering. And I think everybody kind of knows that most companies are seeing revenue losses from lack of sales because of plant closings, store closings, or just lack of demand for products and services that other companies or consumers don't absolutely need today. The part of the context that hasn't gotten as much attention so far is the financial operating crisis. And that's basically that cash collections, the ability to collect on your accounts receivable, have dropped by over half for many firms. Basically, companies have stopped paying each other what they owe in the month of March. In addition, CFOs have their managers calling around and canceling vendor arrangements where spending is cuttable. But the biggest issue is that if your company typically collected $10 million a month from receivables, that number for the month of March may have been less than 5 million. And that is a significant and difficult problem that will challenge your finance department to their core. So in this environment, even typically safe contractual payments like rent, bank payments, those aren't being made. And the proposed government rescue effort is a start, but most leaders can't wait or rely on a government bailout to cover payroll. So without cash flow incoming, many firms are having to look to limit cash flow outflows, which eventually means reducing pay expense. So what are some of the ways that people are acting on this? Hiring freezes, status changes from full to part-time, salary freezes, salary reductions, we've seen those, suspending variable plan payouts, performance-based separations, furloughs, and layoffs. So one trend we are seeing in this environment is that people are emphasizing furloughs over layoffs. And generally, furloughs are viewed the same as layoffs by the unemployment office and health insurance providers, but you should check on your local regulations before choosing to do a furlough over a layoff. But as a label, it does feel much better to impacted employees. We would recommend that you clearly inform impacted employees that rehiring is not guaranteed unless you plan to rehire everybody. And part of a furlough, firms are reducing the normal severance formulas and setting aside consideration for years of service in favor of equal treatment of all impacted employees. And under furloughs, many companies, not required, but many companies do elect to preserve employee health care benefits. And what we're seeing as a reaction to the current environment is that firms are actually mixing multiple of these tactics simultaneously. They clearly start by identifying employees with performance issues. Then they may do a furlough of 10 to 20% across the board. Then with the remaining population, you would implement, say, a base pay cut. What we're seeing as the typical cut is about 20%, 7.5% to 10% for people that are on the lower end of the salary scale, and 30% or more, depending on grade, for senior leadership. And then we're seeing many CEOs taking no pay or very, very deep cuts. Basically, once you go to salary cuts, most people are cutting variable pay very significantly and up to 100%, and commission rates, and deferring payout on commissions until the cash is actually collected. Suspending 401k matches, profit sharing plans, or defined benefit contributions, where optional, is a lever that people are pulling. There is some motion towards seeking to negotiate temporary relief from union contract rates where it's possible. A combination of pulling these levers are yielding some people anywhere from a 25 to a 50% decrease in payroll and benefit costs. These are the types of cuts that your peers are considering, or in some cases, actually implementing. It's a tough year. So in conclusion, I want to refresh that in times of great disruption, transformation accelerates. Make sure you're ready and positioning your company for the future. In the short term, most companies will react by cutting costs. And in the fall of 2020 and beyond, it is certain that your organization and pay will be volatile and changing fast. We will eventually come out of this just like every other major recession, but we need to be ready to adapt. And you need to maintain visibility with your executive team now and show them that you're ready to guide them to adopting the right approaches to pay, talent strategies, and performance as the world around us evolves. Keep safe, and thank you for your time today.